The silent watchers, Dr. Elena Vasquez, pressed her palm against the cold metal of the observation deck, watching the stars shift as the Aurora's edge dropped out of hyperspace. The research vessel had been her home for 3 years now, chasing ancient signals and dead civilizations across the galaxy's outer rim. Most expeditions ended in disappointment, but something about this one felt different. "Elena, you need to see this." Captain James Rivera's voice crackled through the comm system. She could hear the excitement barely contained in his professional tone. The bridge buzzed with activity when Elena arrived. Captain Rivera stood before the main display, his weathered face illuminated by readings that made no sense. Beside him, Engineer Zara Kim frantically adjusted sensors while Communications Officer Marcus Chen worked at his station with unusual intensity. "What am I looking at?" Elena asked, studying the seemingly empty space before them. "That's just it," Rivera replied. "According to our instruments, there's nothing here. But look at this." He gestured to Zara, who activated a different sensor array. Suddenly, the display filled with the outline of something massive, a structure easily 10 kilometers long sitting invisible in the void. "Cloaking technology," Zara whispered. "But the power requirements for something that size should be impossible. Whatever's generating this field has been running for a very long time." Elena felt her pulse quicken. In 15 years of xenoarchaeology, she had never encountered anything like this. Most ancient ruins were cold, dead things stripped of power millennia ago. This was different. This was still alive. "Can we get closer?" she asked. Rivera nodded. "Marcus has been trying to hail it for the past hour. No response, but we're not detecting any weapons or hostile intentions. Just silence." As the Aurora's edge approached, the structure's details became clearer. It wasn't built like any alien architecture Elena had studied. The lines were too clean, too familiar somehow. When they reached docking distance, airlocks became visible, sized perfectly for human use. "That's impossible," Elena breathed. "Humans have only been in space for a few centuries. This thing looks ancient." The away team consisted of Elena, Zara, and 2 security officers. They wore full environmental suits, not knowing what atmosphere, if any, awaited them. As they crossed from their ship to the mysterious station, Elena noticed something that made her stop in her tracks. The airlock controls were labeled in what looked like an archaic form of English. Once inside, their lights revealed corridors that stretched into darkness. But as Elena stepped forward, something incredible happened. Lights began to activate along the walls, following her movement. When Zara tried to move in a different direction, nothing happened. The lights only responded to Elena. "It's reacting to you specifically," Zara observed, scanning with her instruments. "But I can't figure out why." They followed the lit pathway deeper into the station. The architecture grew more magnificent as they progressed, with soaring halls and chambers that spoke of a civilization with incredible engineering capabilities. Everything was sized for humans, designed by minds that thought like humans, but built with technology far beyond anything Earth had ever achieved. The pathway led them to a vast central chamber dominated by a pillar of soft blue light. As Elena approached, a figure materialized within the light, humanoid but clearly artificial, with features that seemed to shift between male and female, young and old. "Welcome home, child of Earth," the figure spoke, its voice carrying impossible warmth for something made of light and energy. "I am the Keeper. I have waited so very long for your return." Elena's throat went dry. "I don't understand." "Return? From where?" The Keeper's expression showed something like surprise. "You do not remember. Of course you would not. The great forgetting was thorough." The figure gestured and the chamber around them changed, walls becoming transparent, revealing the cosmos beyond. "Once your people ruled the stars. The human Imperium stretched across 3 spiral arms, 10,000 worlds where your kind thrived and grew." Images began to appear in the space around them. Massive fleets of ships with designs that seemed almost familiar. Cities that floated among the clouds of gas giants. Space habitats that housed billions. all of it unmistakably human in origin, but grander than anything Elena had ever imagined. "Impossible," she whispered. "Our history only goes back a few thousand years on Earth. We've only had space travel for— Your current civilization is young," the keeper interrupted gently. "But not your first. Your ancestors reached for the stars long before your current age began. They built wonders, fought great wars, and eventually chose to forget." The images shifted, showing darker scenes. Fleets in desperate battle against something that seemed to devour light itself. Worlds going dark, the human fleets making what looked like a final stand around a dying star. "The Void War lasted 3 centuries, the keeper continued. Your ancestors fought against an enemy that sought to consume all conscious thought in the galaxy. In the end, they found a way to win, but the cost was everything they had built. Rather than let their children inherit a galaxy scarred by such horrors, they chose to start again, fresh, clean. They scattered the survivors to primitive worlds and let time heal the wounds." Elena staggered, her mind reeling. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the vigil is ending," the keeper replied, and for the first time its voice carried sadness. "I was left to watch, to wait for the day when humanity would be ready to reclaim its birthright. That day has come. The galaxy grows dark again, and only humanity has ever stood against the darkness and prevailed." The chamber began to vibrate with increasing intensity. Elena could hear Zara shouting through the comm, something about massive power fluctuations throughout the station. "What's happening?" Elena demanded. "The beacon is activating," the keeper said, its form beginning to fade. "Soon, all the hidden stations throughout the galaxy will awaken. Your scattered children will remember who they are. The ships that have slept for millennia will answer their call. Humanity will rise again." Elena felt panic rising in her chest. "Wait, we're not ready for this. We don't know how to—" "You will learn." The keeper's voice was barely a whisper now. "You always do. That is why you were chosen to stand guard against the dark. That is why you alone have the strength to face what is coming." The station shuddered one final time, then fell silent, but Elena could see through the transparent walls that something had changed. Across the galaxy, tiny points of light were beginning to flicker to life. Hundreds of them, thousands. Back aboard the Aurora's Edge, Captain Rivera's face was pale as he showed Elena the communications intercepts they had gathered. "It's everywhere," he said quietly. "Every human colony, every outpost, every world where our people have settled. They're all reporting the same thing. Ancient structures are awakening. People are having dreams, memories of things they never experienced. And the other species—" He paused, swallowing hard. "They're mobilizing their fleets." Elena stared at the tactical display showing ship movements across known space. Every major alien civilization was on the move, heading toward human space, with obvious hostile intent. "They're afraid," she realized. "They know what this means." "The question is," Rivera said grimly, "do we?" 3 days later, as the Aurora's Edge raced toward the nearest human colony, Elena stood again at the observation deck. Behind them, the ancient station continued its slow orbit, no longer hidden but gleaming like a beacon in the void. Ahead of them, the galaxy was changing, and humanity was about to discover that they were far more than they had ever imagined. The children of Earth were coming home, whether the galaxy was ready or not. The gathering storm Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Firebase Titan, watching reports flood in from across human space. In the 3 months since the beacon awakening, as historians were already calling it, the galaxy had transformed into something unrecognizable. "Status report," she called to her staff, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 30 years in the Colonial Defense Force. "Ma'am, we now have confirmation from 847 human settlements," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres. "All report the same phenomena. Ancient technology responding to human presence, buried structures emerging from underground, and civilian populations experiencing what can only be described as genetic memories." Sarah nodded grimly. Her own brother Marcus had been part of the discovery team that started this cascade. The reports he had sent back were almost impossible to believe, but the evidence was overwhelming. Humanity had not originated on Earth as a primitive species. They were the descendants of a galactic civilization that had deliberately erased itself from history. "What about the fleet activations?" she asked. "That's where it gets interesting, Admiral," Torres continued. "We've identified over 200 derelict ships that have suddenly powered up. Most are still in deep space, but they're moving toward human population centers. The designs, they're incredible. Technology centuries ahead of anything we currently possess." Through the command center's main viewport, Sarah could see one such vessel. The dreadnought Eternal Vigilance had emerged from a nebula near Titan Colony just 2 weeks ago. It was over 3 kilometers long, its hull gleaming with an alloy that seemed to absorb and reflect light in impossible ways. When the human crew had boarded it, the ship's AI had greeted them by name, as if it had been waiting specifically for them. "Admiral," called Communications Officer Park, "incoming priority transmission from the Hegemony Council." Sarah's jaw tightened. The Hegemony was the dominant alien alliance in this sector of the galaxy, consisting of 5 major species who had filled the power vacuum left by humanity's ancient disappearance. In the 3 months since the awakening began, their rhetoric had grown increasingly hostile. "Put it through," Sarah ordered. The main display filled with the image of Chancellor Vex, a tall insectoid being whose species, the Kithura, served as the Hegemony's diplomatic face. Behind the Chancellor stood representatives of the other member species, all radiating barely controlled hostility. "Admiral Chen," Chancellor Vex began, his translated voice carrying unmistakable menace, "the Hegemony Council demands an immediate explanation for the massive military buildup occurring throughout human space." "With respect, Chancellor," Sarah replied evenly. "We are not obligated to explain our internal activities to the Hegemony. These vessels are within human territory and pose no threat to your interests." "No threat?" Chancellor Vex's compound eyes glittered. "Admiral, in the past 3 months, humanity has revealed a fleet capability that rivals the combined forces of the Hegemony. Ancient weapons of incredible power are awakening across your territory. Your people speak of reclaiming some mythical birthright. How are we to interpret this as anything other than preparation for aggressive expansion?" Sarah felt the weight of history pressing down on her. Through the genetic memories that had been awakening in humans across the galaxy, she knew the truth. Her ancestors had not been conquerors. They had been guardians, protectors of younger species against threats that existed beyond the galaxy's edge. But explaining that to the Hegemony would be impossible. "Chancellor, humanity seeks only to defend our worlds and our people," she said carefully. "We have no territorial ambitions regarding Hegemony space." "Your words ring hollow, Admiral," Chancellor Vex replied. "The Hegemony has maintained peace and stability in this region for over 5,000 years. We will not allow that peace to be disrupted by the return of a species with delusions of ancient grandeur." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. "Admiral," Torres said quietly, "our long-range sensors are picking up massive fleet movements in Hegemony space. It looks like they're mobilizing everything they have." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, feeling the genetic memories stir within her mind. Images of vast battles fought in the space between galaxies, of her ancestors standing against horrors that defied description. When she opened her eyes, her resolve was absolute. "Send word to all human colonies," she ordered. "Begin full activation. Of all recovered assets. If the Hegemony wants a war, they'll discover why our ancestors were feared across the galaxy." The battle for New Geneva began without warning. The colony was one of humanity's newest settlements, home to barely 50,000 people on the edge of the galactic rim. It should have been an easy target for the Hegemony's opening strike. The Hegemony fleet that dropped out of hyperspace consisted of 300 vessels, led by the massive dreadnought Sovereign's Might. Against them stood a single human ship, the recently awakened cruiser Dauntless Spirit, crewed by volunteers who were still learning to operate their ancient vessel. Captain Lisa Wong had been a cargo hauler just 4 months ago. Now she sat in the command chair of a ship that responded to her thoughts as much as her voice. Its AI treating her as a long-lost child finally come home. "Hegemony fleet is demanding our surrender," reported her tactical officer, a former mining engineer named Rodriguez, who had discovered an intuitive understanding of the ship's weapons systems. "Tell them we decline," Captain Wong replied, her voice steady despite the odds. "All stations prepare for combat. Let's show them what human ingenuity looks like." The Hegemony fleet opened fire first, hundreds of energy beams lancing out toward the single human vessel. But the dauntless spirit seemed to dance between the attacks, its movement pattern so unpredictable that the enemy targeting systems couldn't achieve lock. "How are we doing that?" Rodriguez asked in amazement as they weaved through the barrage. "The ship's AI is learning from our neural patterns," Wong replied, information flowing into her mind from the vessel's consciousness. "It's not just following our orders, it's thinking like us." What followed was unlike any space battle the Galaxy had seen in millennia. The human ship didn't try to match the Hegemony's firepower. Instead, it used tactics that seemed to come from nowhere. It hid behind asteroids and struck from impossible angles. It used the enemy's own weapons against them by positioning disabled ships in the line of fire. When its main guns were damaged, it weaponized its cargo bay, launching mining charges that turned into guided missiles. But it was the boarding action that truly shocked the Hegemony forces. When the dauntless spirit was finally surrounded and boarded, the human crew didn't retreat to defensible positions. Instead, they scattered throughout their own ship, turning the corridors into a maze of ambushes and traps. They used maintenance shafts and engineering spaces that the aliens couldn't navigate. They improvised weapons from everyday equipment and showed a level of adaptability that the rigid Hegemony forces couldn't match. In the end, the human ship was destroyed, but not before taking 27 Hegemony vessels with it. More importantly, the battle was broadcast across the galaxy, showing every species what humanity was truly capable of. The response was immediate. In human space, colonists who had never held weapons began volunteering for military service. Ancient shipyards buried on dead worlds began to stir to life. Most significantly, humans throughout the galaxy began to truly remember who they were. Admiral Sarah Chen received the news of New Geneva's fall while standing on the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance. Around her, a crew that had learned to operate advanced technology through inherited knowledge worked with the efficiency of their ancestors. "The Hegemony made a mistake," she said to her assembled staff. "They wanted to crush us quickly to make an example. Instead, they've shown the galaxy that humanity will fight, that will never surrender, that will make the cost of victory higher than they're willing to pay." "Admiral," called her communications officer, "incoming transmissions from 17 human colonies. They're requesting permission to activate their recovered fleets." Sarah looked out at the stars, feeling the weight of her species' destiny. Her ancestors had chosen to fade into obscurity rather than burden their children with the memories of cosmic horror. But now those children were grown, and the galaxy needed its guardians again. "Permission granted," she said. "Send word to every human world, every colony, every outpost. Tell them the vigil is over, tell them it's time to come home." Across the galaxy, ancient ships powered up their drives. Weapons that had slept for millennia began to charge. And in the space between stars, something vast and hungry stirred in the darkness, drawn by the conflict like a moth to flame. The children of Earth had awakened to their birthright. Whether they were ready for what came next remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: humanity would face it together, as they always had, with ingenuity, determination, and the unshakable belief that any problem could be solved if you just thought about it the right way. The galaxy was about to remember why humans had once been its guardians, and why some things were worth fighting for, no matter the odds.